Hi and welcome to the second of the online Animexperience workshops. In this one we're going to be looking at how to design and make your characters and your backgrounds for your stop motion animation. So character design can be a very complicated and in-depth process, and some animation companies will spend millions of pounds developing and designing a character, and that can take quite a long time to carry out, and that's before any animation takes place. If you don't have the time or the budget, don't worry, you can still create fun and interesting characters to populate your stories. I'll be giving you some tips and showing you how to create a simple character for stop motion animating using modelling clay, plasticine, and I'll show you how to create some simple backdrops to use in your stop motion animations. So what do you need and what are you going to end up with? Well, for your character you're going to need pencil, paper, modelling clay and some accessories possibly. And for your background, you will need pencil, larger sheets of paper, coloured pens, pencils or paints. And this is what you'll end up with. So there's some important things to consider when designing and making characters that will take a short amount of time. So I'll set you a task at that point and I'll ask you to pause the video and then to complete the task and then come back and continue the video, so that hopefully at the end you should have a character ready to be stop motion animated and a background for them to act in. Okay, so let's get into this. First of all, we're going to look at designing the character you want to build. Now, in the animation industry, they'll generally concentrate on three key areas when they're thinking of the look of the characters, as well as the story that the character needs to tell. So, those three key areas are silhouette, colour, and exaggeration. Okay, so it's not important for you to do all of these things, but it's interesting to know what professionals look at when they're designing their characters. So for a silhouette, basically that means, do they have a recognizable shape, even when they're shown just as a black object? When looking at characters this way, you can begin to recognize some basic shapes, and those shapes also tell the audience something essential about your character. So you tend to get, with a square shape, somebody who's reliable or trustworthy, someone you can depend on. With a circle shape, they tend to be lovable and cute. And if it's a triangular shape, they tend to be edgy and dangerous sort of characters. Okay, so colour also helps to tell your story by reflecting the overall mood. But what you may not have recognised is that famous characters tend to have dominant colours. For example, SpongeBob SquarePants is quite yellow. So, but when you're talking about the mood of your story and the mood that you're trying to convey in your characters and in the way that the film looks, you tend to sort of get things which reflect how the colours make you feel. So blue would be moody, sort of cool look to it. Red might be angry, fiery sort of scenes. Yellow could be something happy, but interestingly, it also could be somebody who's quite sick. And green tends to have things which are full of life or healthy, but again, they can sometimes sort of indicate someone being sick. Okay, so when you have characters that are exaggerated, there'll be certain features which are sort of larger than life that aren't actually going to happen, or aren't going to be, like, you won't have a massive nose like Pinocchio, or big feet like Pluto. What you will also get is something that emphasizes that character's personality. So exaggerating things about them that will sort of tell you something about what they're about. Okay, so there's one other thing to consider when you're designing and making your characters, and that comes to telling the story. So you need to think about your character and what they actually need to do in your story. Now, a good example of this is, say you had a character that has an itch and they can't find where it is. So what you have to do then is to make your character have arms long enough to reach all the different parts of their body, and maybe also to design a hand that you can see a scratching motion. And so you've got to think about that when you're designing it. Make sure that the character can do what you need it to do in your story. Okay, so there's something else that you can do which will help you to design your character, and that is to do some research. Now, all decent animators, all animation companies will do research. They'll look at tons of material, images, movies, to help them design their character. Nothing is truly original, let's say. Okay, so before I set you a task, I'm going to show you an example of something I've pulled together, a bit of research that I've looked at for my character. So the character that I want to accidentally set off in a rocket ship, I want her to be a young girl of about 12, of Indian origin, possibly in a traditional type outfit that's been adapted into a modern quirky style, her own style. She has to be quite independent, I think, intelligent, headstrong, and willing to take risks. Now, you won't be able to represent everything on your mood board on your character. So there may be one or two things that will help you define, that you pick out from all the images that you find, that will help you to define what you're looking for. And I think for me in this example, it's going to be the skateboard and the bindi, which is the small red mark on her forehead. Okay, time for your task. So in this first task, and don't forget, you've got to pause the video and do the task, and then you can come back. Okay, so I would like you to look for some images to help inform you of your character design. So think of the things that you want to have in your character that you might be able to find pictures of that will help you to design it. Okay, good luck. Pause the video now. Okay, so you've done some research, you've got some images that you can look at to help you think of the design of your characters. So what I'd like you to do now is to maybe make some sketches. So this is going to be your second task. Task 2 is to do some simple sketches of what you think your character should look like. And remember, refer to your research, look at the pictures. If there's something about in your pictures that you think, oh, I could use that, then try and incorporate that into your sketches. Okay, good luck. Pause the video now. Okay, so you've done the research, you've made some sketches. Now it's time to put those things into action and start modelling your character. Okay, so you can consider this task 3. What I would recommend you do though is that you pause the video. So I'm going to be showing you on another camera how to start modelling. And I'm going to sort of run through the video and sort of speed through bits which take a bit of time. But I would recommend that you pause at that point so that you can do what I'm doing on camera and finish it, and then we can continue together into the next stage. Okay, so I'm going to move on over to the other camera now and start modelling. Okay, so first of all, you want to soften your plasticine. It might be cold and it might be quite hard. And the best way I found to do this is to take a piece no bigger than the palm of your hand really, and start to manipulate it. In other words, squeeze it and squash it, and basically warming it up so it becomes more pliable, so you can mould things better with it. And that will only happen if you do this for long enough. Unfortunately, it is the nature of the beast. You have to tame it in order to mould it. Okay, so I'm going to show you one way of making a human type character, but this isn't the rule for making characters. You make your characters however you want to make them. This is just a way that I've got used to doing over the years, and it's quick, and I find it quite easy to get to a basic human shape quite quickly, very much in the style of a morph. If you remember seeing Morph on TV. Okay, so I'll start by moulding it into a short, stumpy sausage. From there, I will start to mould a head and a neck, and I'm gently squeezing the plasticine. I'm not pressing it too hard, and I'm leaving a sort of round shape at the top as I'm squeezing the neck, and the round shape at the top obviously is going to be the head, and the neck is the neck. So it looks a little bit like a bottle. Then the next stage is to make the arms. And again, I'm sort of gently squeezing. I'm not squeezing the plasticine too tightly, or making the arms too thin and floppy, because I'd like to keep them attached to the body. Remember, these limbs, they're going to be moving around, and if they're very thin and small, they're going to break off quite easily. So we want to still have a bit of thickness to them. Okay, and as you're going around, you can sort of smooth out any kinks and creases that you don't like as well. So the next stage is to do the legs. And the legs, again, like the arms, I'm just going to gently squeeze and mould some legs in order to get the character to be able to stand up. Now, one thing to consider with plasticine is it's quite a dense material and it can be quite heavy. Now, you basically don't really want to give the character too big a head because that would make it top heavy. So we've got to make sure that the legs are sturdy enough to support the whole of the body. So you have to make sure that they're quite thick and quite chunky. The next stage would be to give it feet. Feet will add stability, will stop it from falling over, but you do have to sort of make sure the bottom of the feet are flat and that the heel sticks back a little bit from the body, and make sure that the feet face forward. If they face to the side, the character will tend to fall forwards or backwards. So just remember, keep it nice and flat at the bottom, a little bit of extension to the heel, and feet facing forward, and your character should be able to stand up quite nicely. Okay, once you've got the basic human shape right, you can start to add features. I usually start with the nose, gently sort of squeezing out a nose shape, and maybe a couple of sort of indentations where the eyes are going to be. I can then also move on to the hands. So a gentle squeeze at the end of the arms will give a nice round shape, and you can nip a thumb. And because this is plasticine, you might find that you sort of accidentally break bits off, or you might need to do some running repairs. That's the nature of plasticine. You have to do running repairs as you're making your character, and also as you're animating it. Next, I'm going to add some eyes. So I've taken 2 bits of white plasticine, and I'm going to roll them in my fingers until they're round. And when they're the right sort of size, I'm going to place them on the head, and I'll sort of gently roll them into position so that they're in the right place. And with a gentle squeeze onto the head, they're now eyes, or the whites of the eyes. Okay, so for the mouth, I'm going to roll a very thin red piece of plasticine into a long thin sausage, and I will loop it back on itself to make a circle, join the ends together, and before I attach it to the head, I'm going to mould a pair of teeth to go in behind, and I'm going to do that by rolling some very small bits of white plasticine. I'll join them together, and then I'll give them a gentle squeeze to flatten them, and they should have the appearance of teeth, which I will then attach to the mouth, and then I'll put that onto the head of the character. And I'm going to, while I've got the red here, I'm going to pop the bindi onto her forehead. There we go. So I'm going to do the pupils of her eyes next, and I'm choosing a darker brown, and again I'm going to roll some very small bits of plasticine into a ball, and I shall place them carefully on the eyes, and with a gentle squeeze down they'll be in position. Okay, so for the hair I'm going to use brown plasticine, and I'm rolling it out into very thin strands, and I'm going to be placing those onto the head of the character, and I want to have the hair overlapping a little bit on the face and definitely coming around on the shoulders, and it doesn't have to be in any particular style, it just needs to be looking like hair, to be honest. So there's several different ways of doing this. I mean, you could mould a cap and sort of spread on the top of the head, but I quite like this effect that I'm going to get with the rolled out plasticine. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some clothing for the character. Now normally I would actually make that part of the character out of the colour of the plasticine, or I could actually use actual fabric to cover the plasticine. For this I'm actually going to use a different colour plasticine as a thin sheet, and I'm going to put this over the body and mould it around the body that way. So there's several different ways of doing this. You can cut out collar shapes and try and put it all together as you would normal clothing. And of course, as you will see, the back of the character is totally exposed. So we'll obviously have to use some more plasticine here to cover the back area. And as we go along, we can sort of mold it into something that resembles clothing. Okay, so I'm not happy with the legs here, so I'm going to actually remove the legs. And it's a good point to show you a different way of modelling for your character. So I'm going to get some green plasticine, and I'm going to roll a very thick sausage in the plasticine, and I'm going to bend it around to make the legs. But if you notice, I've actually put a spike on top of the legs. Well, I'm going to make use of that to connect that to the main body in a second. But before I do that, I'm going to model some feet. And again, I've put spikes on the ends of the legs to pop them into the shoes that I'm making for this character. And using a tool, I'm going to make the holes to put the legs into the shoes. And likewise, I'll do that with the body and connect the body that way. And then as I've connected the two together, then I can start to mold in the clothing, so it sort of joins together more naturally. And there we end up with a complete character ready to be animated. Okay, so for this next part, we're going to be looking at backgrounds. And for your background, you could do all the same amount of pre-work that you would have done for a character. So you could look at the colours that you're going to use, the shapes. You could even do a mood board and do some research. I'm not going to task you to do that, but if you would like to do that, you can do that now. Okay, so you might have done some research, you might not. It's not really important for this workshop. I think as you go on in your career, though, you should really do research. Okay, so we're going to move on to doing a background. Now, I have a good judgment of the size of things. I've been doing this for quite a while, so I know how big I've got to make the background so that the camera just sees background and not the outside of your background. That will make sense in a second when I show you my setup. But I also, from that informs me how big my character had to be. So I've done a lot of sort of pre-measuring, but this is a point where you could see how I do it, and then when you've got your setup ready, you can pre-measure before you make any characters and backgrounds. So you can look through the camera and see what the camera sees. So that will inform you how big everything has to be. Okay, so I'm now going to show you my setup. Hi. So this is my setup. It's very basic. I haven't got any fancy sort of gear. I've got my mobile phone. I've got my tripod, which is a GorillaPod. I'll explain a bit about that in a second. And I've got a little attachment, £2 from eBay, that I can put my phone into that holds it steady on with the tripod mount, so it can screw to the GorillaPod. The big red box is my wall. I'm hoping that you've got a wall that you can fix your backgrounds to. I don't have a wall in this very small room that I'm working in, but I have this box with some heavy things in it, so it's not going to tip over, that I'm going to attach my background to. And my background is basically going to go like that. Okay, so it's going to attach to it that way. Now, you can probably see that I'm using a bigger sheet of paper for the background. It's a lot bigger than A4. These are some A4 sheets here. You can stick these together if you haven't got any big sheets of paper, and disguise where you've joined the bits of paper with bits of your background, drawings like bits of furniture or anything, trees, anything that you can draw on your background you can use to disguise where the paper joins together. I sort of dispense with that because I'm using a bigger sheet of paper. So this is quite a big sheet that I'm going to attach with some blue tack. Okay, so I'm going to stick this up now. There's nothing on it at the moment, but I want to stick it up so to talk about the size of your characters and the size of your background. So I'm sticking this up just with bits of blue tack. Bit of advice, never mix blue tack and plasticine. It turns into this horrible stringy mess that will get into all the nooks and crannies of your clothes. So yeah, don't mix blue tack and plasticine. Okay, so you probably notice I'm sticking it down on the floor as well, on the bench, because I don't want it sliding around if I'm going to be animating. I usually fix it in about 6 different places. So there's 2 on the wall just up here, there's 2 here, and there's 2 here. And that makes this nice and stable, and it won't move around because that will shatter the illusion of being in the world that we've created here. Now I'm going to angle this, which is going to shatter the illusion of being in this world that I've created. But you can probably see, vaguely, that the character comes to about here, so it's quite high up. And if I stick the character there, that's quite a good size in the frame for this character. Like I say, I've prejudged, I'm pretty aware of how big they need to be. But what you want to try and do is avoid cutting the character off top or bottom, making it so big that it doesn't fit into the screen. And likewise, we can see the edge of the background here. We want to move our camera so that all we see within the frame is background. And unfortunately I've got a bit of a shading thing on this phone. I'm going to move the camera here on a tripod so you can see that. So we can't see the edges of the background, basically. Okay, so that's what I mean about judging for size. Now if I grab a pencil and I'm going to very roughly mark out the area that the camera can actually see, and this will help when I'm actually drawing my background. Although I would probably do a background that fills the whole piece of paper to make it nice and colourful. But I know for a fact that with my pencil, I'm just going to make a small mark about there. The camera doesn't see past that point, so there's probably not much point in me making background in that area. And likewise, it comes over to about here, and then it goes down to about there, and as we come forward, I'm going to carry it on around here so that you can see. Oops, I've come down too early. So the camera basically sees, if I move this camera a bit closer, you can see I've drawn a very rudimentary sort of circle shape. That's what the camera will see. So that's the area that you need to really concentrate on for your background details. So of course, having said that we've got this area of interest on your background, you can zoom with your camera. You can zoom in. You can move your camera a bit further away from the background so that you see more. But try not to move it too far that you start to see past the edge of the paper, because that really will shatter the illusion. So that's why it's probably a bit of good advice to fill the whole sheet of paper with your background, but leave this area as the main acting area, like you would a theatre on stage. This would be the stage area, and the set dressing would be behind. It wouldn't be too much obscuring the actors in this area, but there might be bits and bobs around that really help to tell the story, help to tell where that scene is located. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the best way to actually make this background, and I'm probably going to time lapse this, but basically I know that the difference between this area and this area is that this is the floor and this is the stuff that is above ground. So you wouldn't put a tree, you wouldn't draw a tree on the background here, not unless it's fallen down. So if you were going to have a tree in this area, then you would have to make it out of plasticine and have it come up out of the ground, like trees do. You could also have trees in the background, of course. lots of trees. In fact, I'm going to make this an outside scene, and I'm going to make it on the edge of a farm. So I want to have maybe some trees in the background. This bit needs to be sort of grassy green, maybe with some muddy patches. I might do a trough for a cow. There might be an edge of a barn sort of sneaking in on the backdrop there, and there might be starry sky up here. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to capture it and time lapse it so that you can see it happening. And good luck with yours. It's probably a great time to set the task for this part, and that is to create your background. But I would recommend watching my time-lapse version first so you get an idea of what I'm doing, so that you can apply that to yours. Okay, so I'm going to use crayons to do my background with some oil pastels. You can use anything you like. I would stay away from using chalky pastels because the powder will go over all of your characters. So stick to something that's fairly sort of colourful and quite waxy, so that it doesn't go on to your characters or to rub off onto any other parts of your background. So like I said, I'm going to be doing a forest scene. So I'm going to sort of put a light fold around about there. Just a light fold. I'm not going to press down too much, just so I know where the ground starts. This is above ground, and this is the stuff that's below ground. Okay, I'm happy with that. Okay, so my background's now done. I'm going to stick it up and stick it down. And hopefully, if you've been following and pausing the video when you needed to, you should also have a background ready for your animation. So like I said before, I'm going to stick it down in 6 places to make sure it's really sturdy and it's going to stay where it is. And you can, because it's glue tack, you can shuffle it around to get rid of any kinks in the paper. And I'll stick the front down as well so it doesn't catch when I'm moving around on this. And I'll just put my camera in there. I'll turn it on first. So you can see when I move, I reposition it slightly so I can see a few more of my trees. I don't want to see the edge of the background, so you can see that I'm moving my camera around a bit, so I can start to see the barn on the side. I'll move the camera around so you can see that. So I've got the barn over here and the trees, and I can see a little bit of the height of those trees. And I'm going to get my character, stick my character in there, and lo and behold, she looks like she lives there. So that's the setup ready for it to be animated, and I'm going to switch cameras. Speak to you in a second. Okay, so that's the end of this workshop. You should now have a character and you should now have a background. Now we're ready to move on to the next one, which will be to animate your character. And I'm going to show you a little bit about the software or the apps that you can use for stop motion animation. And we'll also talk a little bit about sound and how to stick that onto your film as well. Okay, I shall see you then. Goodbye.